What do you do whenever you've been waiting on God to bless you with the very thing that you want so bad that you see other people having around you, but for whatever reason, this blessing from God continues to elude you? Today, we're going to take a look at a beautiful story in 1 Samuel chapter 1 about what to do when you're waiting on God. Coming up. Hey, my friend, welcome back to The Beat. My name is Alan Parr. Thank you so much for tuning in. If this is your first time here, it's a pleasure. If you want a free ebook, click the link in the description box below. If you enjoy this video, consider subscribing. Hit that little bell notification so you won't miss a beat. So let me just start off by saying I know exactly what it looks like and what it feels like to wait on God when it seems like God has just forgotten about you. It seems like everybody around you has what you want, and it seems like for whatever reason you just can't get it no matter how hard you try. Listen, I wanted to be married whenever I was 22, 23, 24 years old, and all through my 20s and all through my 30s, I wanted to be married. I wanted to have a family, but I did not get married until I was 40. And so I understand the season of waiting. So what I want to do in this video is I want to talk to you about what do you do? How do you posture yourself in these seasons whenever you are waiting on God to bless you with the thing that you want to have? If you've been following us on Fridays, we're in the midst of a series called Heroes, where we're going through the Bible and we're looking at different characters' lives and we're taking different life lessons that we can learn from them. And today we're going to look at a beautiful woman found in 1 Samuel chapter 1 named Hannah. And there are three lessons that I really want you to take away from her about how to wait on God. The first thing that I want to highlight here is Hannas Problem. I want you to really dig into the story and I want you to really understand what this woman was actually going through. It says here, there was a certain man from Ramathaim, a Zuphite from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Joram, the son of Elihu, blah, 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 blah. Okay, verse 2. He had two wives. One was called Hannah and the other Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Now let's stop right there. That is a problem right there. More than likely, he got married to Hannah. They probably tried to have children for some time, but for whatever reason, Hannah was barren. God had not opened up her womb. And so after some time, he got worried that he wouldn't have a son to carry on his family name. And so he went out and stepped out and got another wife. And if you can imagine, this is one of the problems that Hannah was facing. And so there's a few things that we see that Hannah was experiencing tremendous pressure to have children, because during this time, that was a woman's main role, was to be able to give her husband children. So I can imagine that she was experiencing pressure from her spouse, right? Because he was putting pressure on her. Hey, we need to have kids. What's wrong with you? How come this isn't happening fast enough? But not only is from her spouse, but also from her society as well, right? In that day, the society told her, this is where you should be. This is what you should be able to do. And for many of us, that's where our anxiety comes in, because society says that by 25, you should be married. And then by 27, you should have your own house. And by 30, you should be into your career. And then by 35, you should have at least 2, maybe 3 kids. And at any point in that continuum, when you're behind and you're not living up to what the society says that you should, you start to feel behind. You start to feel anxious. And as a result, you get frustrated on waiting on God. But not only did she experience pressure from her spouse and from her society, but also pressure from herself, right? This is something that she wanted for herself. She probably wanted kids on her own. But then the fourth area of pressure that we often experience is our surroundings. I want you to notice here in verse 3, it says year after year. Now let's stop right there. That lets us know that whatever her situation is, it did not improve overnight. It says it was year after year. And once again, my personal testimony, I went years and years waiting on God, living a celibate life in the midst of my 20s and 30s, when everything in me wanted to go in the other direction. So it says year after year, this man went up from his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh. Now, if you can imagine here, every year they would go up to this place called Shiloh and they would offer sacrifices and worship right there. But if you can imagine, just visualize this for a second. Hannah goes up there with her husband and his second wife with all of her children running around. And not only is she frustrated with that, but she also is frustrated because she sees all these other Israelite mothers around there with their children as well. And and she is surrounded by the very thing that she wants to happen in her own life. And no matter how hard she tries, she just cannot have it. But to make things worse, her husband's second wife provokes her to jealousy. It says right here, verse 5, but to Hannah he gave a double portion because he loved her, and the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival, that would be Peninnah, kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Man, this is really, really tough when you have people around you that are throwing it up in your face that you don't have the very thing that they have, the very thing that you want. So whenever we experience this pressure and this anxiety, it ultimately creates bitterness in us. Bitterness against who? Well, I'm sure she was bitter at her husband. She was bitter at her husband's wife. And then she was also probably bitter at God as well, because she knew that it was God who closed her womb and it was God who could open her womb, but for whatever reason, God was choosing not to. So this is the first thing that we see about her. Before we talk about what she did, I want to really highlight the problem that she was experiencing. Now, I want you to notice how Hannah responded while she was waiting on God to bless her. This is beautiful. You don't want to miss this. It says here in verse 10, in her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. So the first thing that we see in terms of how she responded while she was waiting is that she responded in prayer, but not just any prayer. She responded with specific prayer. She said, God, I want you to bless me with a son, not just any child. And then she responded with passionate prayer. She didn't just pray. She was weeping. She was crying. She was in pain. She was in anguish. She was pouring out her heart and her soul to God. But not only that, her prayer was pure in terms of her motivation. She said, God, I don't even want this child for me. I want this child so that I can give this child back to you. So let me just ask this question right here. What is it that you want from God? Are you praying specifically about it, or have you given up on the power of prayer, not even believing that God can change your situation anymore? But more importantly, what is your motivation for why you want what you're praying for? Is it because you just want it all for yourself? Or is it because you want God to bless you with something that will help you advance the kingdom more? I would argue to say that that is a prayer that God will be more inclined to answer. Oh, but it gets better, because not only did she respond in prayer, but she responds in praise. Now, this is super important here. Do not miss this detail. It says here in verse 19, early the next morning, they arose and worshiped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time, Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, because I asked the Lord for him. Now, don't miss the order. Notice, she did not get blessed with the son. She did not get pregnant and then praise. She praised God first. It says they went up and worshiped first before the blessing came. So my question here to you is this: are you able to worship God and praise God and thank God and honor God before the blessing ever comes? This is what happened to this lady. She worshiped God first, she praised God, and then they conceived and had a child. It's easy to praise God after he blesses you with what you want, but it's another thing to be able to worship God while you are waiting for him to bless you. But here is the third thing that we see that Hannah shows us about how to wait on God when you're waiting for him to bless you. Not only did Hannah have a problem, she had to persevere, but she had the right perspective about God. I want you to notice here in chapter 2, after she gets the blessing, she looks back and she says this: do not keep talking so proudly, or let your mouth speak such arrogance, for the Lord is a God who knows, and by him deeds are weighed. So he says, hey, be careful about speaking so proudly in terms of you knowing exactly what God is going to do or what God is not going to do, because God is in control of everything. You don't know what your tomorrow looks like. You don't know whether God's going to bless you with what you want tomorrow or next year or 5 years from now. So she says, be careful about talking proudly, but it gets better. She says here in verse 4, the bows of the warriors are broken, but those who stumbled are armed with strength. She sees this flip happening out. She says people who were once really strong and had bows of warriors are now broken. And then she says those who stumbled, those are people who were struggling in the past, now they are armed with strength, but it goes better. Those who were full hire themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. What is she saying? She's saying, hey, maybe you are in a situation now where you are hungry, but God can flip and turn that thing around to where you're full. Or maybe you're in a situation where you were full and you had everything. You need to be careful because tomorrow you could be out there begging for food. And so she says she had the right perspective, understanding that God could change a situation at any time. And notice it says here in verse 5, she who was barren, I think she's talking about herself, has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons, maybe that's Penina, maybe it's not, pines away. So do you see the perspective that she has? So let me close this out by saying this. From my personal life, I can tell you from experience, I'm telling you what I know, that I went all my 20s and 30s, as I said earlier, not married, not having a family. But whenever I turned 40, God turned some things around so quickly. He gave me a ministry that you're looking at right now. He gave me a new math business. He gave me a new wife, and he gave me 2 beautiful, healthy children, all within about 3 years. And let me encourage you today, if God can do that for me and he can make those changes in my life in a relatively short period of time, my friend, what is stopping you from believing that God can do the same for you? If you found this video helpful in any way, feel free to share it with a friend. Also, if you haven't done so already, I would love it if you would subscribe. Check out some of the other videos on this channel. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time on The Beat.